Try to remember the question.
I got it. Can I put my sunglasses on?
So, do you want to take that question now? And then we'll move on to introductions with our rest of the panelist member.
Yeah. Yeah, the communication was never about perfection. I mean, as others have said, it's a journey. But what we have said is AI and data and technology is as bad as it's ever going to be, right? And as long as we recognize that as an organization and keep pushing and learning from our mistakes and making it better, we know that the step change improvement is going to be valuable, and it's going to continue getting more valuable. We made a bet. There's no guarantees on a bet, right? But and our leadership team had to be comfortable making a bet rather than saying this is a guaranteed outcome. I don't know. I can keep going, but that's how we communicated it. If that helps.
So now I think we have time to go over introductions with our new panel members. Let's start from one side and move to other.
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Hendricks. I'm with Cognite. I lead our organization in the Americas and work closely with Case in their journey, and look forward to working with them more in the future.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob Taco. I'm with C3 AI. I'm an industry solution director, and I've been working with Dow for the last 2 years on their furnace reliability project.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Clark. I work with NanoPrecise. I play a unique role as chief evangelist. I've been in this industry for about 40 years. Started as a maintenance tech and moved up through the ranks the hard way.
So if we have any question from the audience members, please raise your hand. My colleague is out there. He can pass on the mic and you can ask your question. You just need to raise your hand. Let me know if there is any question from the audience member. But one thing I definitely want to ask from all of you, AI, machine learning, this is a new technology for many end users out there. I want to know from solution users as well as providers, what are the major challenges when you are working with AI or developing machine learning models? What are the major challenges that you see? And then how do you try to overcome those challenges?
I'll take that from our side. In our case, our primary use of AI internally was to recreate an operating environment. So the major concern that we had all the way through was to ensure that what we were creating was actually realistic and validate that the machine learning was producing the reality. And the only real verification we've had over that, in all honesty, is time. We've trained the models, we've ensured that what we have in place is correct. And then it's keeping those guardrails in place to go through, refine the training, adjust the outcomes and block some of the hallucinations and ensure that everything stays along the right path. And I guess then going into the future, the same is to ensure that what we're seeing within our AI systems and our AI analytics are not creating us the problems, not creating the end user additional maintenance and additional heartache, where in reality they had an alternative.
I could give a perspective from the provider viewpoint. We've heard this a lot throughout the last couple of days. I think change management has been a theme, and Chad touched on that in his presentation. Especially for operators, a lot of these end users have backgrounds in chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, and in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of buzz around the word AI. And what does that really mean? And I think that education for end users is really important. Make sure that you drive that understanding for the end users about what those models are doing, what the outputs of those machine learning models mean, and how they can use that. At C3, we've really made a focus in the last couple of years in bringing on industry experience. So folks with backgrounds in manufacturing and process engineering, reliability engineering, to help bridge that gap between end users and operators and folks who are developing these applications like computer engineers and data scientists.
So I guess my perspective on that, I spent 10 years in industry, in a pharmaceutical industry, and then I spent 20 years at an OT company working on applications. And I think scaling is probably the thing that's the most difficult, right? So who here has been part of a successful pilot that showed value, right? Who here has been part of an enterprise-wide application that has sailed across the enterprise and provided value universally across all of your assets, right? So even if somebody has, it probably took them 5 years. So I think AI, that's going to be the biggest challenge. You're going to find pockets of value, but doing it at scale is going to be really, really difficult. And with my background in operations and then in OT, one of the reasons I ended up at Cognite is my take is the biggest inhibitor to that scaling of value is your data, right? And so as Josh pointed out, if you can solve the data problem, then you can scale people's insights, you can scale application development, you can scale Gen AI algorithms. So I'm pretty passionate about thinking about scaling value, not just showing value. Certainly time to value is really important, but think about how do I get to a point where I can scale Gen AI across the enterprise?
So Bill, I don't know if I can beat that one. That was good. Scale is obviously top of the list, but the one that kind of comes to mind for me is the biggest casualty often in AI deployment is the people. And so there's a certain level of empathy that doesn't happen in a lot of AI deployments. And so I guess one of my tops is how do the people fit into the AI deployment? Mm-hmm. How does the person that is most accountable for taking action part of that deployment? And often it's at the end of the process, the end of the deployment, that we try to figure out how the people fit in. And so for me, top is how do they fit? Because this group instills a lot of fear into people as we deploy AI. And so it's just one of those things for me personally that I think we miss when we deploy AI systems.
So when we embarked on our Cognite journey, it started March of last year, so just under a year at this point, to address both of these things, the scaling and the human side, right? The very first thing we did before we said, yes, we're going to go do this at all, was we did a proof of concept, proof of value, and we showed if we do this on a small scale, this is what you could have. And we took it to the front lines and said, do you want it? The overwhelming, feedback was, yes, we want it yesterday. It's awesome, right? We enacted the human action model. If you're familiar with it, there's 3 parts, right? Sense of unease, a vision of a better state, and a path to get there. They were all already uneasy because they were working on that left hand of the mental model, right? Where they've got to go to all these different places. We showed them what it could look like if they had all the data tied together with AI, right? And so that took care of the people piece. And then from a scaling perspective, using that same kind of knowledge graph technology, we were able to scale across our entire fleet of 7 facilities and then get 30% of our organization in the platform all in less than 8 months, right? So if you do it correctly, if you apply the right mental models and the right data standards and the right technology with the right people, it is possible to do. It's not easy, but it is possible.
Excellent insights. We do have a question from the audience member.
Sure. 3 great customer stories, by the way. I heard some great common elements, right, of taking the use cases and really driving to the value, right, for the pieces. But From the vendor standpoint, I'd like you heard very consistently, hey, we're not going to have armies of data engineers and data scientists in the plant. These are going to be run plan engineers. These are going to be control room operators, field operators. And I'm curious, especially from the vendor standpoint, how do we continue to make AI consumable, leverageable, understandable at that control room layer?
Yeah, good question. Some of the challenges out there are exactly that. How do we build it so that AI is consumable? One of the things, and this is for all of us, whether we're on the vendor side, whether we're on the practitioner side, is how are we building our strategy? How for deployment, for use, for normalizing, for everything that we're deploying? How are we building that strategy? And I think one of the things that I see most often is companies looking for technology to be their strategy, right? And often you'll find companies will be looking for that technology to deploy out and to use in their plant, but not with a full understanding of how it impacts the process. Right, so strategy first and the technology second. So don't be looking for that perfect solution. I'm coming from the opposite side of the fence now. I'm trying to put my other hat on. Don't be coming to the solution provider looking for a strategy. Come with a strategy looking for a technology.
Yeah, so I think what's most important to make sure that in the hands of an operator they can use these tools is explainability. In the framework of an asset performance application, you get an alert that something's wrong from a machine learning model to an operator who's been operating a plant for 40 years. They have no idea what that means. Historically, you have alert management where there's specific. This is the action you're supposed to get if you get this alarm. With machine learning models that are multivariate, it becomes a little bit more convoluted. So I think it's important to codify in the application what you should do when you get an alert and what you could potentially do about it. In the framework of our reliability application, if an alert comes up, it's got an evidence package that says this is why you're getting an alert, this is what can be causing it, and these are things that you can potentially do to fix it. On the flip side, if we're talking generative AI applications, those also can be really black box where you don't know where you're getting the answer from, what it means, if it's a hallucination, if it's factual or not. So I think if you're delving into generative AI, you need to make sure that you've got those guardrails in place, and we've heard a lot about guardrails today. But I think a good example of that is making sure everything's traceable. So provide a citation, provide a hyperlink to the source. Take that end user directly to where these applications are getting the information from, so they can use that tool to help them make their decision. Because at the end of the day, you need the people in the loop to eventually drive the change that's going to affect your business.
Yeah, we have a lot of conversations around the user interface itself and how people are going to perceive that and be able to use it. Similarly, like the alerting emails, we talk a lot about how we want to structure the data so that it's easy for them to consume. And then from the other point of view, I guess, we are also not pushing machine learning on the end users. We will provide the interface, explain to them how to use it, and we'll go into the details if they want to hear it, right? It's like there's some people who don't care. They just want to see what's coming out of the application and what they can do with it.
As I think about the next wave with generative AI, right? The enabler is going to be ease, right? Just being able to talk to your data and get answers is going to be delightful for people. The barrier is going to be a lack of trust if you don't get answers that you can verify. So if you can make it delightful for the people to actually answer questions and engage, just like the ChatGPT on your industrial data, and they can understand where that data came from. They can say, yes, you told me that this operating pressure's never been over the design pressure, but where'd that data come from? How do you know that? Tell me your reasoning. then that becomes something that engineers and operations folks can trust. And so I think thinking about solutions that create that ease but reinforce that trust is going to be the flywheel. And I'll just, another customer of ours, Celanese, Ibrahim, he's going to be up here speaking at 4. They have 50 sites, all their data in a data model, and they were able to deploy a co-pilot in a matter of months with the help of Radix developing that for them. And they were in Ibrahim can tell you, but it was half a year. They ended up with 5,000 monthly average users talking to their data, right? So that's the type of scale you can get to if you can delight the users and if they can trust the data.
One other piece here, right? I agree with everything that was said. I also said earlier, though, that we need to have a radical change. And I think that also includes changing the way we think about the work that we're doing as operations companies, right? We may completely change a role. We may, with the efficiencies we should be gaining, we might not need as many process engineers, right? And they become the kind of translator between the technology and the process groups, or the operators and the technology group, right? So I think it's a multifaceted answer.
We have another question at the back.
Yeah, my name is Sam. I'm with BASF. So I guess a question for the provider is, how do you overcome the ROI question, right? Everybody knows that it is cool and the dashboard looks cool and all that, but when you go down to the plant level, right, and who the people who's going to sign the check, it's like, okay, how much is this going to cost? How much am I getting back, right? How do you guys have overcome that question, right? On top of the coolness of the app for scalability and adding value.
Yeah, we've been around for about 8 years, and that was probably our biggest struggle for the first 6.5, I would say. We've settled on what we found to be a very impactful way to engage with customers, where when we say start small, pick a unit, right? A few data sources, and in 6 weeks, we'll have all that data into a data model. Your users will be delighted. To Josh's points, they'll say, you can't take this out of my hands unless I'm dead, right? I absolutely have to have this. So that helps with the change management process, but it doesn't help with the overall value, right? So those testimonies aren't going to get your executives to write millions of dollars of checks. So then we go and we say, what could you do differently? What could you at the site do differently if all your data was connected like this? And they come up with use cases. And then we'll do a rapid prototyping, and usually we'll do it overnight, so it's pretty magical. So the next day, they'll see the new workflows. They'll see what it is. And that's when they start saying, maybe we really can scale this. Maybe we really can have 40 use cases deployed in a year and a half, right? And that becomes the place where you can start putting together a business case, because you can demonstrate that rapid deployment. Then it only takes 2 or 3 use cases that you can show that you can deploy across all of your assets, all of your sites, which is they've never been able to do before. And that becomes the ROI to driving that value. But you have to start small, you have to prove that value rapidly, and then you have to capture the imagination that you can scale. That's what we've found is a way to get organizations overall engaged.
Yeah, I would add on to that, agree with everything you said. Starting small, but also starting in a targeted approach to where the business sees the highest value. So I think it's important to, before you do anything, get together with your stakeholders, your technology provider, and just brainstorm, whiteboard on where the highest value is based off previous issues that you've had in your business, and tackle that first use case. Go after that, get results that you can show to end users, and that really gets the buy-in and gets the ball rolling, and then you can continue to scale. I think in terms of once you're in production, you usually have that aha moment. You talk a lot about making it a delight for the end user. When you get that first alert that an operator can go and actually take action in the field and it affects their business, that's really the moment that they understand the potential, and you kind of see their eyes widen to the possibilities that you could do when you kind of scale that across the enterprise. And I think in terms of generative AI applications, that aha moment is the first time you have an end user, ask a question and it pops up an answer in a couple of seconds that would have taken them hours of digging through a shared drive or an old file cabinet in the corner office in the office building to find that answer, and it's at their fingertips. So that's what really drives that buy-in.
One example I love, we were working with a customer and we had put out a few use cases, and we were there to talk to the site management and the corporate management about the value proposition. And we got there on a Monday, and their site had been down all weekend, right? And it cost them a whole bunch of money. And so the last thing they want to do is talk to us, right? And so as we were talking to them, they said their biggest challenge was coming in over the weekend and just figuring out what had happened, right? So we built a Gen AI agent because we had all their data. And so we built a Gen AI agent that simply said, summarize for me the happenings of the last, and you just put in your time period and everything. And it literally spit out everything that they needed to know in order to get their site back up. And so we walked into the management and we were like, hey, we built this afternoon, and we literally demonstrated that if you have access to all the data, you can just ask it questions and it'll come back and give you answers. That was a pretty compelling moment with that customer. So
My answer is a little quicker since they answered it. I just want to remind everybody that ROI is still a fairly unsolvable problem for everything, because AI didn't change the fact that finding return on investment. I think robotics and SCADA and some of the other things are probably still struggling with return on investment. But I think the thing that we've learned specifically is that cost avoidance itself is not that great of a return on investment, right? And we have this discussion all the time that when you capture a cost avoidance, often it never hits the bottom line, and it never goes beyond the avoidance itself, right? We're not producing maybe more product. We're not doing the types of things that would improve the process. That cost avoidance it's a nice number, but it's not great. The one that really provides a return on investment is the bottom line. Are we reducing the dollars spent on the assets? And so we've really focused in on that and trying to help our customers get to the point of reducing their bottom line.
I guess one additional thought here from the operations company perspective. You've already got things you're working on, right? You've already got problems that you know are very hard to solve. We shouldn't be tackling technology for technology's sake. It should be to solve the problems that we already know we have. And so if you have a defined problem with a value perceived, these technologies are all just alternatives to solve that problem, right? So you shouldn't have to go justify those on their own. They're just ways to solve the problems that you already have that you know there's value associated with.
That was an excellent thought to wrap up our discussion today. Can we please have a big round of applause for our speakers and panelists?